This is the TechCurrents podcast, real talk about technology and stories from working in the tech world. All opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the host and guests. And now, here is your host, Sam Cavalier.
Hey, everybody, and thank you for once again joining us at the TechCurrents podcast. I am your host, Sam Cavalier. I am joined once again by my good friend and co-host, Ron Melanson.
Hey, Sam. Good to talk to you as always. And as you can see, totally sported out as you are with our TechCurrents gear.
That's right. Yeah, we are very, very soon. We will be prepared to launch the TechCurrents merch store. We're very close. Very close.
Of the 5 people who actually listened to us,
That's
I think
right.
2 or 3 of them asked very specifically. Now, I will
That's
tell
right.
you, just from a pure marketing perspective, the Yeti mugs that you came up with are spectacular. And I know EZL bought himself a yellow one. He was very proud. He
Yes.
supports the show, supports the channel, and he was wildly excited when we got him a Yeti cup. So.
Yes, the Yeti cups are really cool. I will disappoint everybody. They are not going to be in the merch store. I will see what I can do to get something at least similar up there, but at first pass, those are not going to be up there just yet. But again, we will be launching the merch store soon. Lord knows, as you said, for the 5 people who have shown interest in merchandise, some way to support the show, seeing as how up till now we are entirely self-funded. And continue.
Thank goodness and thank goodness we both still have full-time jobs.
I know, yeah. If I didn't have a full-time job, yeah, that would be very problematic. Nevertheless, being self-funded, we're hoping to find a way to help boost all that without me having to stand on a corner with a sign saying we'll podcast for your pocket change. So that being said, we have a couple of things we'll talk about today. I did post a teaser on one of the things that we will talk about, so I will get to that topic momentarily. We will spend some time with some of our the most familiar things to folks who have listened to our cast before. We will talk LinkedIn lunacy. There continues to be, at this point, it's not even anything that I'm surprised at anymore. I can't even pretend that I'm surprised anymore by any of it. Just when I shouldn't say that. Just when I think I've seen everything,
something new pops up.
Pops up, and I just sit back and scratch my head, and I'm like, you cannot be serious. But fair enough. From there, we will take a little bit of a stroll down this week in LinkedIn, our Twill notes, which will cover some of the major headlines that we have been looking at, in terms of news that has been that is actually decent news and things that are interesting that we can chat about. And then finally, we will dive into the topic around layoffs in tech since 2023. We see all kinds of people, in my mind, speculating on what the true cause of these layoffs are. We are going to spend some time talking about what's really behind.
But wait, it's not AI? It's always about AI.
Well, there is more than one thing that is contributing for sure. But I have made the argument that, and I'll make the argument again, that there is something that was the equivalent of a legislative gasoline that was poured on the fire, and there was an impact to that. And there's a lesson to be learned for all of us as a result of this, and we will talk about that. So, with that said, let's take a couple minutes and dive into, one of our favorite topics, and that is LinkedIn lunacy. What kind of ridiculous craziness have we seen on LinkedIn over the last couple weeks? The stuff that you would just otherwise say you can't be serious.
So this week, this was an interesting week because for some reason I got looped into a feed having to do with fitness models and OnlyFans. And I don't quite, I don't quite know exactly what sort of rabbit hole or how that all started. So I must have made a comment on somebody who was like a third connection to someone else. And then they came in over the top. And next thing I know, it's, there's people looking to send me connections and I'm, checking out their profiles because it's since you and I started doing the podcast, we joke about only 5 people, but I think I've doubled or potentially quadrupled the number of followers and number of connections that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a pretty significant queue of folks that I'm kind of vetting as I go through, right? It's like we have no mutual connections at all. And, you look like a scam account or we have nothing in common. You're kind of circling the drain on that one. I'll probably not accept it. But this week I started getting like LinkedIn requests from folks. And then when I looked at their profiles, I'm like, I can't believe what they're posting on LinkedIn. It is a cross between looking for OnlyFans fans plus glamour shots. And we've talked about glamour shots before. I mean, people just posting, pictures that are just arguably, we'll just use the term less appropriate for LinkedIn, more appropriate for Instagram and potentially Facebook. And then also just some of the profiles that are out there on this business network is boggling to my mind when I read some of the things that these people post. And I think you and I were before we jumped into the recording, you and I were looking at a couple. And there's a bunch of links to videos on cooking and modeling and how to do the perfect swimsuit shots and whatnot. And I'm
Yeah, I mean,
sure,
come on.
well, I'm sure that there's some folks that need that, but I don't know if they're the ones that are on LinkedIn right now, with everything else that's going on.
I totally want to say that I appreciate the fact that there are folks who may not have any social media presence outside of LinkedIn. I get it. There are folks who may not have any social media. And I also want to acknowledge and say that I get that in some cases we have, we build close relationships with our coworkers, especially, especially when we've worked with them over a certain amount of time, we get close uh, relationships that are built with our coworkers. That being said, and we've said it before, LinkedIn is not Facebook. And you really should ask yourself, when I'm posting this, do I want my future employer going through my profile and finding out that this is what I'm posting on?
See, we talk about that. Anything on the internet lasts forever. And I think we've addressed this in some other LinkedIn discussions. But things that you post online do follow you forever because it's archived somewhere. And yeah, you may think, you deleted those pictures from Cabo, but somebody who really wants to do a deep dive on you can potentially, find those pictures. And it's interesting to see, and I understand people transition through a variety of roles, variety of jobs. And some things are normal, right? Model posting, if you will, or bikini shots, which I still have yet to understand. There's a few recent posts of shirtless guys who are very cut. God bless
Yes.
them.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's like, dude,
I am not one of those guys, by the way.
no. And, I've got a six. I tell my wife I have a six pack, but I keep it well hidden. And
I have a keg.
very nice. I'm going to remember that when, when I see your wife, I'll ask her how the keg's coming along. But it's, it's strange. It's like just an appropriateness thing is, and some people are, I don't say offended by it, but some people scroll by, some people block the accounts, but a lot of
Right.
people forget that anything you put in this social media void stays there forever. So, you're going to change jobs. Let's say you're doing something and that's for the sake of argument, OnlyFans focused. And you do a lot of posts around trying to drive people to OnlyFans. I didn't realize this, and somebody recently told me that like OnlyFans does not advertise, right? Like you can't go to OnlyFans and search for something. You actually have to have a direct link for someone's content.
That's right.
So, well, it's interesting. You would know that. I didn't know that. I had to research that, but apparently you are, you're right there. But when, when I was going through that, I was trying to figure out, because you see a lot of it on Instagram. You get a lot of these teaser videos and people throw some stuff out and they will follow me and then they include their link.
Right.
And it's starting to cross over a little bit into LinkedIn, but I get it. You were a barista at Starbucks at one time, and now you're going to be an IT person, or now you're going to be doing something else in operations or whatever for a large company. That's wonderful. But the appropriateness of things that you're posting online for people who may vet you, may look at what you've posted over the course of time, is something you just need to be aware of. And some people
think through it.
People don't.
Think through it, because in some of these job applications, they specifically ask you for your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, most of them do.
Yeah, that's true. Most of them do.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, these folks, those folks will look. They're going to look. And they're going to some of them will want to see the type of, not just your job history, but what kind of content is this person posting?
Right.
What are they saying? Because they need to, one of the things that they need to know about is, is this person going to be a risk?
Right.
And so,
exactly.
It's something worth thinking about. That's all. Absolutely. I agree.
The other thing that started popping up again, not again, but this week, was people posting about open relationships with their spouse. I was really surprised that people were posting
I don't even
things.
want, we could just stop right there. Like I don't want to know. So that just goes right back to when you post something, do you really want your future employer
Mhm.
coming back to review? I mean, really, is that what you want? Like, I don't know about some folks, but like, I know you and I have we have executives who are either following us or or directly connected with us. Is that stuff you really want to share?
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, you kind of way crosses the line of oversharing.
Right.
And the justification that people try to pull together, they try to tie it back into business to try to make it vaguely, thinly veiled to be on LinkedIn. It's kind of a strange construct. But we've had all the normal lunacy again this week and last couple of weeks. The open to work banner, that horse has been beaten. The horse is like a pile of bones, and people keep beating that.
Engage.
Yeah,
it's not even
worth it. I will tell folks on the podcast that our friend Amy has gotten so disgusted with people giving her a hard time that now she's posted that she's willing to, before you yell at her, you have to pay her $10.
I love that.
I told her,
that's great.
I think you and I have to step up and kind of be her muscle, because Lord knows we're both prepared for that.
That's right.
And
I need to create a yell at Amy jar meme.
Right.
A yell at Amy jar meme.
Yes, and it's cost you $10 to our Venmo, and then we'll cut Amy in for a couple.
We'll cut Amy in. Yep.
We got to pay for the podcast somehow.
That's exactly right.
All
That's
right.
right.
So I mean, we can jump off the lunacy.
We gotta have some kind of revenue stream for the hundreds of listeners that we have.
Exactly. And if we have to, we have to charge Amy a feed, and to make sure she gets her Venmo. I think we can figure that out.
And
Um,
let me just
yeah, go ahead.
let me disclaim one thing, right? If you're, think when we talk about inappropriate or whatever, things that you want to be posting, right? I'm not talking about your fundraising for something. That's not what I'm talking about. Like that's not what I'm because folks will often use LinkedIn to be able to post things like, "Hey, I'm fundraising for this charity for this and this reason." Fine. I have no listen. I in the past have been a top fundraiser for the 9/11 stair climb here in San Diego, and it's because of the reach that I had and who I was connected to. I had people who would donate significant sums of money, and you know that's okay. That's not what we're talking about here, right? Showing that you're doing philanthropy is not something that's not inappropriate, but it's legitimate. But that's just I won't say I'm speaking for Ron. This is one man's opinion,
Mhm.
so take it for what it's worth. Now, switching gears, as you said, to this week in LinkedIn, our Twill notes. I've got a couple of topics that we can talk about fairly quickly. Number one. Number one is side hustles. So, article was posted this week about, actually, it was posted today, very specifically. So, in spite of everything that's been going on, a number of people, we have heard about this for years now, have done side hustles. How many? I personally was surprised to find out that in 2023, as many as 4 out of every 10 Americans had some kind of second job to generate discretionary income. I was very surprised. I did not know it was that many. And it is, right? I mean, we've had the explosion of the gig economy and all that. So, but that because of things, well, assuming it's because of things like falling rates of inflation, that number dropped year over year. 2024, it was down 3%. 2025, it's down an additional 9%. So, I mean, literally, it has dropped 12% since 2023. And this was according to a survey done by Bankrate. And that there is some concern that volatility in the economy is going to spike that number again. And it's really, to me, it's interesting that even with 27%, that means 1 out of every 4 people that you probably see out there very likely has a side job. I personally was surprised by the number. I don't know whether you are, but I certainly was. I was not prepared for that. I think that's a fairly significant number. I mean, if you figure that whatever it is, so what is the US economy is, or the US population is, we'll just use a round number like 300 million.
Yeah, about 300 million.
300
That sounds
million.
reasonable.
I mean, that's like 75 million people.
Yep. Now, I will
75
also
million?
tell you, though, if you do spend time looking at the bank rate piece, I mean, younger generations are more likely to have a side job. And I do question if it's more of a model of people at, we'll say early stage are
Okay.
wildly
Okay.
underpaid.
Okay.
Right. And so they say Gen Zers, we'll say 18 to 28, right? They seem to have like 34% of them are
Okay.
supplementing their income with a side job. Now,
Okay.
of course, these are the same people that are trying to rent, apartments and spending $2,000 a month for basically a closet. Um, and then they jump into millennials, which is 29 to 44, and that's about 30% of them.
Okay.
And then when you get into the Gen Xers, it's about 20%. And then boomers, it's also
It
around
falls off.
20%.
All right, so it falls off.
It falls off. But
Okay.
bear in mind, boomers, 61 to 79, a lot of those folks have side hustles, or where they're maybe even doing multiple jobs for a variety of reasons, right? Some of them are
Yes.
doing side hustles because they need the healthcare insurance,
Right.
right? Because the United States does not have, we have a healthcare industry, right? We do not have a healthcare
Yes,
system.
that is exactly right. Right.
And we're much more focused on, we're less focused on prevention and more focused on how do I profit.
That's right.
And it's interesting. I mean, when you think about who's doing what, where, and why, the Z's are just constantly ahead, right, of others on side hustle participation. But remember, they grew up in that space.
Yes, they did.
So
Yes, that is absolutely fair. Yes. Okay, what else did we learn this week? The other thing that is a particularly big topic is the news that landed in the last couple days that OpenAI. So Sam Altman, not satisfied with just doing Chat GPT anymore, has decided he is going to launch into the ever lucrative industry of trying to replace or put a competitor out to Microsoft Office and Google Docs. Because that's always worked for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a path we won't, I could take you on a journey on that one. But yes, a lot of people have tried desperately to unseat the king of
Open Office.
Open Office tried. There was when getting the Wayback Machine, there were a lot of competitors to Excel, and
to Microsoft
Access
Word
and Word, DBase and Paradox. It was a bunch, and sadly, none of them are around anymore.
You mentioned WordPerfect, and there's generations who have no idea what that was. Like, that's insane, right?
Don't get me started on the VI editor, people.
Now, here's what I will say. Now, the other thing that I think is more interesting than trying to launch Office, and what prompted me to look into this to begin with, was the notion that somebody said that they're planning on launching a browser.
Yep.
Now, that I think is, because, by the way, the browser market's not crowded at all. That is a wide open frontier, right?
No barrier to entry there.
No barrier to entry there.
Nah.
However, the valid point that has been brought up is that, hey, at this point, folks are using things like ChatGPT rather than going and Googling it.
Okay. Very much so. Yeah. And and Google's ad revenues are seriously at risk because of that, because people are going to ChatGPT. And the simple fact that ChatGPT farms the internet for you and then brings you back a summary, as opposed to, hey, here's 10 million links you can slog through. It will go through and pull up give you answer your question, as opposed to.
It's a double-edged sword, though.
Correct. Very much.
Right? Because by doing all that tracing around the internet for you, it means it's picking up just as much bad information as it is factual information.
Yes.
So, although I do believe that there was a politician in recent history who referred to something as alternative facts, I didn't know that it'd be like alternative math, I guess. I don't know. Alternative science. Who knows? So, okay, fair enough. We'll just leave that there. Finally, the last thing, and this is, no tongue in cheek here, because this is very serious, is in the last 2 weeks, we heard about another 9,000 of our colleagues from Microsoft that have been told that their jobs have been eliminated. That is nothing to joke about. We dedicate most of our episodes to helping job seekers, helping people deal with being laid off and the mental health challenges that come along with it, helping people to prepare themselves to find what's next. So finding out that folks that we are friends with, not just people we're connected with. I'm talking about people that we are friends with and have been for a long time.
Yeah, these
Have-
are like ex coworkers from our teams.
That's exactly right.
I mean, this one hit home for at least for me, uh, predominantly because there are some folks for me on the East Coast
Yep.
who either worked with me or for me on the same team as you
Yep.
across years.
Yep.
And
People I sold with for
yep.
years, as in, when I did my short stint as a salesperson, 5 years. I say short, 5 years isn't short, but when you've been doing this as long as we have, 5 years is short. You know, we sold together for 5 years, and we were extremely successful at it. And yeah, it's mind blowing. So 9,000 people. That brings the total at Microsoft this year to 15,000. And since 2023, that brings the total to 25,000. 25,000. 25,000 people will fill a soccer stadium in the United States. Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego um, is what it got my attention, actually. Um, you know, Snapdragon Stadium seats 35,000 people. So at any given night, it's possible that the size of the audience of the San Diego Football Club is the number of people who lost their jobs from Microsoft alone since 2023.
Yep.
That is a crazy amount of people. And I think it's a good lead in to our main topic for tonight. I think it's a great lead in for tonight's main topic. You know, what is really behind the unprecedented wave of job cuts that have happened since 2023, right? I mean, as we've said, there's a lot of folks who, in my mind, speculate or they take the easy answers around what it was, right? It was, look, there was all this overhiring during the pandemic, and that boom is now over because there's a return to office, blah, 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 blah. And, or they say it's AI related. Now, both of those things are true. So I don't want to make it, this is a case where more than one thing can be true.
Right.
But it was, and while this continues to happen, it was brought to our attention that there was an actual lesser known ghost in the machine that is out there and is effectively a legislative gasoline bomb that, when poured on the macroeconomic conditions that we're talking about here, led to a perfect storm causing these layoffs. Because when that piece of legislation passed, there was no pandemic.
Right. Exactly.
So a piece of legislation called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017
Yes, the TCJA.
Yep. Was passed, and in there was a change that was one of those hidden kick the can down the road things. It was a policy that was to take effect in 2022, which it did. And it was a change to the Internal Revenue Code, Section 174.
Right. And, some of the largest tech companies really benefited heavily from the TCJA's corporate tax cuts. And,
Absolutely.
In the early days of this particular legislation, is the benefits were passed on to these large organizations, right? They had corporate tax cuts, overseas repatriation rules, but yet fast forward to today, right? So there was this honeymoon period, and now here we are in 2025. The same firms who took advantage of and appreciated, we'll just use the term appreciated, the corporate tax cuts are now laying off tens of thousands of workers. And I know you've spent a lot of time digging into this, so I'm going to pretty much let you run this next whole section because you've got a lot more data and I'm want to learn as we go. But I'm kind of curious on how much of this comes back to the incentives that were baked into the 2017 law and what it failed to account for. And I think you've got some good
It
data
actually
on this.
it's actually deeper than that, right? So it's not even so much about the corporate tax cuts. And I want to make sure that I want to quantify what we're talking about here, because we're going to look at this entire picture, and we're going to talk about the macroeconomic shifts, which, as I said, before somebody, because inevitably you don't get a lot of interaction with the audience until you say something controversial, and then they want to jump all over you. So here it is. I'm diving into the controversial. However, I'm going to preface my comments with some additional factual information so that there is no misunderstanding here. This is not a single cause event. It is absolutely a multi-cause event. However, I am going to say that there is absolutely a law of unintended consequences that was at play here. And there's a huge learning moment for all of us who are not in a position of being policymakers or legislators that we need to take away from this. So that is literally the moral of the story that I want to convey today, is that as voting public, we need to be aware of things, even if um even if our legislators won't properly educate themselves on something that's happening. So let's dive into this. First, I want to make sure something is perfectly clear on the sheer volume of people that we are talking about. Since the beginning of 2023, now I just mentioned that the policy that was passed in the 2017 law did not take effect until 2022. So 2023 is the first tax year that would have felt the effects of this policy change. This is significant. Since 2023, 500,000 tech workers have been laid off, according to different industry tallies. In the United States alone, we are talking about more than 260,000 employees since 2023 in the US in the tech sector. All of the big companies were impacted. Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, Zoom. None of them were insulated by any of this. They all were impacted. And the reason why, and before that, I got another statistic to throw at you. Tech companies were disproportionately impacted compared to other sectors. There was a 60% jump in layoffs in the tech sector between 2022 and 2023. Now, why is that? Well, simply put, in the tech sector in particular, they were able to benefit from the notion that money that was spent on things like R&D and product and engineering, those items were allowed to be written off as tax breaks. So the money they spent there, they didn't have to pay taxes on that money that was spent. Bottom line, there were no limits to it. They could just do it. In the TCJA of 2017, starting in 2022, that loophole was closed. And now Instead of being able to write that off, they had to pay taxes on all of it. So that meant a massive tax hit. And in some cases, companies that were able to report, let's say a 90, let's just say they were going to report a, they were gonna write off. They were gonna in some cases show a $10 million loss. Now had to show a $100 million profit. Massive swing in their tax burden. It's massive. So when we talk about the macroeconomic headwinds and how these things got influenced. So when we say macroeconomic headwinds, I would almost call these things like Santa Ana winds, because that's what they were. They literally fanned the flames that were started by this, right? You had the overhiring from the pandemic. There was. And so as the needs normalized, there needed to be a course correct. Internal bloat that needed to be addressed, right? Microsoft had more than 200,000 employees, right? When you and I worked there, we started when there were 6,000. There are 200,000 employees now. Okay, fine. There was a huge economic slowdown. Inflation went up, interest rate hikes, borrowing became more expensive. Absolutely. Huge venture capital contraction. Absolutely. The AI revolution landed. Again, there is legitimate decreasing in roles, reducing certain human roles because of AI. And there are some certain companies like Klarna, Duolingo. I just read about another one, Glassdoor. I just read about Glassdoor. Glassdoor is going to be reducing human headcount for AI. All of those things are related specifically to AI. Well, now add in the accelerant. In pre-2022, for 70 years, U.S. companies could immediately deduct 100% of qualified R&D spending. 100%.
Yeah, and I would argue that the outcome of that and the ability to do that has allowed us to create things like Google and like Amazon and like Microsoft.
AI, open AI.
Yeah. Yes,
Being able
exactly.
to create open AI,
Yeah,
things like that.
Yeah, being able to take the tax advantages of writing off your R&D in the moment and not having to
Absolutely.
amortize it across 5 years
Absolutely.
just allowed companies to invest heavily into R&D.
Absolutely. This is the absolute. These are facts, by the way. I don't want anybody to write me saying I'm just making this shit up. These are facts. I can back up every single thing. I have done my homework on this.
Hopefully you didn't use ChatGPT because
I
it
did
does
not.
it does make mistakes.
Yes, I know. In the TCJA, Section 174 was amended to require capitalization and amortization of research expenditures over 5 years and 15 years for foreign research. And it explicitly included software development costs. So this was targeted legislation. However, what they did was they explained it at the time as a revenue raising provision. It was a critical component because they were not going to be able to get the bill passed because they had to make the bill appear deficit neutral over 10-year budget window. And so that's how they did it. They said we're going to generate revenue with this uh, internal revenue code change. But what they did was they delayed the effective date until 2022. And so they did that to push the costs outside of the immediate forecasting window. So they intentionally pushed the date out. And in my mind, that is because they knew exactly what would happen. Now, for the benefit of the doubt, I would rather pretend that our legislators are just incompetent and didn't realize what the consequences are. I'd rather do that than think they intentionally did this knowing that 500,000 people were going to be impacted. 265,000 tech workers in the United States alone. I, I I don't want to believe for 30 seconds that they did that knowingly, because if these tech workers, if as we all are, did the homework that I did, you would realize that your elected representatives did this to you. And that would put their positions at risk, because we're the only ones who can control when they get let go. That said, so this thing happens in 2022. So what does that mean? Well, in 2023, when companies go to file their returns, they realize that they have these huge tax bills that they have to pay now. And now you have, companies that are cash strapped, or worse yet, not profitable yet. So many of these startups are not necessarily profitable, and they know that going in, right? So they're working their way to profitability. They can't afford to have these massive tax bills yet. And now the venture funding dries up and interest rates soar. So now it's expensive to borrow money. You're literally paying taxes on imaginary gains. And so with the new tax burden and the macroeconomic pressures, it blew up the incentive for hiring American engineering, because the amortization on foreign R&D was 15 years. So if you look at R&D spending, it's building. It actually made the notion of building tech companies in America look ridiculous. Like you sit there and you fill out the paperwork. Why would you do this? It's going to cost you so much more. So the R&D spending, and if you look at the numbers, the R&D spending in the US, after growing 6.5% annually, dropped by 3% in 2022, and it actually increased 3.5% in 2022, and it actually decreased in 2023, because companies are now disincented to do this. So the reality is that salaries are off. They're the single biggest expense. Salaries and benefits are the largest expense for anybody. It's not even just a tech company. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest expense for everybody. When I was at the Board of Education in Madison, what was the biggest expense? Salary, benefits. When you were fighting over the class in, the drama class that you were going to cut, and people are like, no, you can't get rid of the drama class, and you're fighting. They said, take the money from somewhere else. You're literally quibbling over the 20% of the budget, because the 80% is already spoken for. The same thing is happening in tech. The largest single expense is in salaries. So when handed a massive tax bill like this, what else are you going to have? Headcount cuts is going to be a direct response to the tax burden. I mean, am I right? Am I wrong? Yeah. It's the only thing that would make financial sense. That's why you and I, in our current thing here, we've not taken a salary. We can't afford to.
couple of the fact that nobody would really pay for what we're doing right now anyway.
No, nobody's paying for that.
Look, the promise
I can tell you that we are not going to get sponsored by Congress after this episode is
probably not
public.
And I know we don't do political stuff, but just out of curiosity, does anybody remember who happened to sign this into law back in 2017?
I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go there.
I know you didn't want to go there, but we should at least mention who did it.
Yeah. Well, it was
DJT.
It was DJT.
Right. So here we are.
Another example of how we can make America great again.
So let's jump forward to 2025. Okay, I think you laid the groundwork on that. So what's going on in 2025 now? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Are these jobs has gone for good? Is R&D being re-encouraged again? Are there any changes in the big beautiful bill?
That is a very good question. Because yes, so starting at the beginning of the year, there was bipartisan pushes to repeal or modify Section 174. It can be said that in the act, whether you call it the one big beautiful bill, I don't give a crap what you call it. In the current reconciliation bill, that's the best way to put it. In the current reconciliation bill, they did repeal this section of 174. That is effectively out, takes place immediately. There was something retroactive. I do not have the information
Yeah, I
on that
believe.
handy.
Yeah, I believe the retroactive was for smaller companies that they could file to get their taxes back that they had paid. But there were some rules with regard to the size of
I'm
the
sure
organization.
there always are, but I think it's
So,
it's important to understand that it doesn't matter. At this
right,
point, the
exactly.
damage has been done. These people are not going to get hired back.
Right. Thank you. That was my next path. It was, do you envision, based on all the research that you've done, are we turning a corner and will we see hiring pick up again in 2026?
I have not seen anything to indicate that yet. I have not seen anything to indicate that yet. Nothing yet. Do I hope? Of course I do.
Mhm.
But right now I got nothing.
That's fair.
The moral of the story, we have to, as in the US, as voting electorate, we have to do our homework because these folks don't necessarily, they don't get enough time to read it. These bills are the reconciliation bill that just passed was more than 900 pages.
I think it started around 1,000. Yep.
Yeah, nobody's reading that. And by the way, before anybody comes back and says yes, but what about? I'll be the first person to say it. I remember when Nancy Pelosi said, "We're not going to find out what's in the bill until we pass it." That I cannot. There is not a more asinine sentence that has ever been uttered. Now that I've said that, nobody can reasonably believe that anybody is prepared to be educated on voting on a bill that's 900 pages with not several days to go through it and understanding the consequences. But as the voting electorate, we have to do that and make our voices heard because this was, in some cases, I'd argue it was preventable. I would argue it was preventable. Because the impact to we've already talked about the impact to the tech sector. It was disproportionate. Yep. It was disproportionate. We have to do our job, and that is to hold our elected officials accountable for this stuff because we are all paying for it now.
Yep.
That is the moral to this story. Be educated because that is how we can prevent things like that. Now, could we have prevented what the COVID overhiring or the increase in the cost of lending with the rate increases? No, we could not do something about that. Absolutely not. What we could have done was avoided making it worse. And this bill made it worse. It did. That provision in the bill made it worse. And it didn't make it worse. It didn't make it a little bit worse. It made it a lot worse. And, literally the timing could not have been any worse. It couldn't have been.
Yeah.
It was the timing could not have been any worse. So, that's my, be educated. That's the best
Right.
thing I could do. The best thing I could say is be educated. The bills are posted on congress.gov. And, if you don't want to take the time, and I don't blame you, to read 900 page bills, that are full of legalese and whatnot. That's no problem. Load it into your favorite AI and then start asking it questions. If you don't feel like you can trust the AI because it's going to go to the internet for information, then use a tool like Notebook LM, which is a closed box. Drop it in there, start asking questions. We have to now be curious about what's going on, because the decisions that are being made, we don't get to say they're not affecting us, because they are, in a bad way. I found this out and about lost my marbles, because
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep. Unintended consequences or potentially intended consequences, depending upon who the authors were and what their motivation truly was.
yes, I was not directly impacted by the
Mhm.
consequences of this bill. I
Yep.
wasn't. But you know what?
A lot of
There were
people were.
a lot of people who were. And
Yep.
at this point now, I mean, 260,000 tech workers. If you have been laid off anytime between 2023 and now, there is a better than average possibility that it's a direct result of this. Keep that in mind.
All right. So we've done a good deep dive now on the rationale and some of the things that we believe are kind of just affecting everything. So look, if you've been laid off, if you have been unfortunately, affected by, the most recent round of layoffs from, I guess it was last week, this week,
Last couple weeks.
yeah, last couple of weeks. We do want to offer help. We want to
Yep.
provide you an opportunity, shoulder to cry on, someone to yell at. I mean, those of us, I've spoken to several folks that you and I both worked with, and, they did, some of those folks are going through the exercise of yelling 1 minute and crying the next, and that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're going to
Yeah.
I think we're going to bring Laura back on at some point to do
We
again,
will.
talk about the mental health aspects and trying to keep your head screwed on straight and not get sucked into the rabbit hole of negativity.
And if you
This was
don't,
not your fault.
it's right. And if we don't want to wait until then, I would encourage everybody to listen to the last episode where we have Laura on and we talk about some of these things.
Yep. Yeah. Unfortunately, we recorded that before a lot of this happened, but when you roll it back, things were happening like laying off in the tech sector was been happening leading up to that. So that's one of the reasons we did it for a mental health perspective. We recorded it in early June, I guess, like right at the end of May, early June, because May
Early
was
June.
Mental Health Day,
Yep.
Mental Health Month.
Yep.
Yep. So we brought Laura on, and that is available if anyone wants to listen to it. She has great resources. Laura Metzer
Yes.
is her name, and I would recommend folks have the opportunity to follow her. She has an amazing set of resources and reach for folks. Everything from recommendations on who to talk to, websites to go to, and I think it's an opportunity to recalibrate yourself. It is an opportunity to remember this was not your fault. You ended up on the wrong side of a column in a spreadsheet. You didn't do anything wrong. You weren't fired for cause. Now, I will tell you that the severance package that our brothers and sisters from Microsoft got was not horrible. It was based on obviously time in role,
Yeah.
time in the
Longevity.
company,
Yep.
and also a 60-day grace period that is by law in the state of Washington or in many other areas that they do need to give you 60 days.
Yes.
So there are a lot of folks who are still on the books, fully covered with their health care, et cetera, for the next 60 days. And then their severance based on their um, time at the company will kick in. And I've heard some folks say it's anywhere between 2 and 4 months. And I think it's just somebody you and I used to work with, Sam, who's on the East Coast here. I think he told me it was his total is 6 months, I believe. So,
Right. It was close to six. It wasn't exactly. It's close to 6 months.
right.
Yeah.
So if there is a light at the end of the tunnel, these are people who are let go with severance, not just let go. Because we've seen a lot of that happening too, where
That's
folks are
correct.
just let go and
I have.
they're wished well.
I know somebody who that recently happened to, where they were
Yep.
let go, and
Yeah.
it's
So again,
Yeah.
We post a lot of information. Sam and I both. My ask is spend some time, read through some of the things that are out there. Doesn't matter if you interviewed for a job in 2022, the rules are all changed. So we are happy to
That's
help
an
you.
absolute fact.
And I do know they have outplacement services that Microsoft is providing to folks. So please, by all means, take advantage of those. Your mileage may
you are
vary.
entitled to them, so
Yes.
use them.
Use
Use
them.
every benefit you are getting.
Now, your mileage may vary.
Yes. This is also true.
Yes, Sam is living proof of that. And since when he left his old organization, he had an opportunity to have some professional work done on his CV and things. And we
Don't know
spent
that it worked out exactly the way I wanted it to,
no,
but that's okay.
but it's okay. It was a great start and an opportunity to rework we'll call it an older non-modern CV.
Yes. Yes. Non-current.
Yes, non-current CV. So anyway, this is a lesson to everybody. Take care of yourselves, take care of your finances. Okay, one of the last things you want to do is get laid off and then realize you're flat-footed and you don't have an emergency fund. Okay.
That's
The
right.
other thing is look at your 401ks. I've posted about this. Sam's posted about this. You do not have to leave your 401k with your old employer. You can roll it to a self-directed IRA. Do not, under any circumstances, take a check from your 401k. You need to
No.
roll it into another institution. Do that.
So if
and
you don't know what to do with it, leave it there until you figure it out.
That's correct. And by moving it to a self-directed IRA, the positive is you have a much greater variety of investment mechanisms and vehicles. The downside is, heaven forbid, something happens and you get sued, your IRA becomes part of your assets. If you leave it in a 401k and heaven forbid someone gets sued, my understanding is the United States law is that 401k is untouchable. So if you got personally sued by someone, say, heaven forbid, you had a car accident and somebody sued you for $1 million and your insurance company paid 500, arguably they can come after you for $500,000 personally. If you leave your 401k with your employer, that is an untouchable amount of money. If you roll that 401k over to an IRA, it becomes part of your assets and it's potentially at risk. Just keep that in mind. I am no expert in this space.
Let me say this. Yeah, we encourage people to seek professional advice from necessary finance professionals in this area.
Preferably licensed.
Preferably. Please
We are
license.
neither
Please
of us are.
license. I listen. At the end of the day, I am part of a number of Facebook groups where there are all kinds of experts in this area that are unlicensed. If you do not know of a financial person that you believe you can trust, and particularly if you live in the state of California, drop me a line. I will be happy to refer you to somebody I trust I trust intrinsically who is licensed. So I will be happy to make a referral to somebody who is licensed. I get nothing out of that, by the way, other than making sure that I have, made sure that somebody didn't make a mistake and they've actually were working with somebody who knows what they're doing. So,
hey, and by the way, if you're soon to be an ex-Microsoft person, a former Microsoftie is very similar to Laura, who kind of recast their career in a post-Microsoft world. Pat Giamanco,
yes.
Giamanco. He is actually a financial advisor, works for Edward Jones, but he's a former softie. And he totally gets it. And he is more than happy to have a conversation with you. And I'll have to let Pat know that we threw his name out there.
That's right. We'll have to make sure we point out that we dropped him a line here. So I will make sure that in the podcast notes, I will spell out Patrick's name so that you don't have to go searching for it. Maybe even link to his LinkedIn profile as well. So we will take care of that.
Cool.
Net. Take care of one another, because It is a tough job. It's tough out there right now. If you are not one of the people who has lost their job recently and you know of people who have, reach out to them. Do not wait for them to ask, because in some cases, they are currently blanking on who to talk to. Give them a call. Just ask them how they're doing. I mean, just knowing that people are thinking about them will be incredibly helpful. We have to take care of one another because nobody else is looking out for us. And it does take a village, and we have to be there for one another. For those who have hung around long enough to listen to this, thank you. We very much appreciate you listening to us. It's always good to know that we're not just talking to ourselves, even though I like nothing more than having a chance to talk to Ron. We have been friends for nearly 30 years and, you know, love him like a brother, but we're doing this for to help everybody out. So thank you for your time. I am Sam Cavalier for my good friend Ron Mellinson. This is the TechCurrents podcast. Take care of one another and have a good day.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the TechCurrents podcast. The TechCurrents podcast is hosted by Sam Cavalier. All content and views expressed as part of the TechCurrents podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the podcast platform, any employment organizations, or any affiliated entities. This podcast is informational purposes and should not be considered for professional, legal, or financial advice. Please consult with your qualified, licensed experts for your specific needs. This is Daniel Iverson. Thank you for listening.